Hello and good afternoon, Doctor. So in this presentation, we're going to go through our implementation of the linked list. So we have implemented the first assignment. That is the patient appointment system using linked list. So at first, our sister Eleanor will go through the patient class, and then Othman will explain a bit about the main function. And then last but not least, I will go through the rest of the code to show you how we implemented the linked list.
Good day, my name is Eleanor Aluge and I'm going to explain the patient class in our appointment booking system. The patient class is responsible for handling patient data and the affairs of the patient group of users. First of all, we have the if not defined, define the patient header, and the patient class inherits the class person publicly. In the public class, we have the linked list implementation, and this patient constructor takes in arguments of the patient ID, first name, last name, gender, date of birth, and phone number, and it also passes the arguments to the person class because it inherits the person class publicly. Now this void function, this set function, is used to set the patient's details, the first name, the last name, the gender. It's used to retrieve these details from the user and store these details. The update function is used to update the patient's information if necessary. The print patient list function is used to print the details of each patient, the first name, last name, and all other details that correspond to a certain patient. This is the implementation of the linked list, the class patient list, and in the private portion of the class we have the patient with the pointer head, which points to an object of the patient class. In the bool is empty function, this function is used to determine if the list is empty or not. If the list is empty, then it returns null. The insert node function is used to insert a node into the list. It takes arguments of patient ID, first name, last name, gender, date of birth, phone number, etc., and sets these details by including a new node into the list, and after which it links the list appropriately. The find node is used to find a specific node, and it uses an ID, which is a unique identifier of each patient. So each patient is supposed to have a unique ID, which is used to scan through the list to find the patient with the specific ID and return this value. But if it's not found, it returns the record is not found and null. The delete node is used to delete a certain patient entry. It takes in the unique identifier and searches for this ID. When found, it deletes this ID, and then after deleting this ID, it links the nodes correctly. The search patient info by name searches for a particular patient using the first name of the patient. We have the current node point is going to be equal to the head, and the current node gets the first name, and if it's not equal to the first name, then this process continues. The current node is equal to the next node, and it repeats this process continuously until the patient is found. Else it returns the statement, it displays the statement that the record was not found on this line. Next, we have search patient info by ID, and this searches the patient's info using the ID number. The insertion sort is implemented to search the patient list, and it begins with using the pointer sorted, and it points it to the null value, and after which the current is pointed to the head. And while the current is not null, then the next member of the list is equal to the current pointer to the next. And finally, we have the display function, which displays the patient.
So this is our main function. At first, we read the patient's info from the file, and then we read the doctor's data as well from the file, and then we have our main loop here, in which we ask the user about his type, which type he is, either a patient user or a doctor or a receptionist. So then we have our main switch case. So in the switch case, if the case is 1 and the user is a patient, then what we will do is that we will make an appointment, as here in the menu. So to make an appointment, we will display the doctor's schedule for the patient, and then he will choose which appointment he wants, and then insert the ID of that schedule. Of course, when we display the doctor's schedule, the ID will be included, so that the user chooses the ID of that appointment and then insert it here. Then the user will key in his information here, using set patient info function. So this is for the patient. If the user is a doctor and the switch case is 1, then what we will do is that we will display the patient's appointments using display appointments function. And then the last one is, if the user is a receptionist, then we will display the patient's list as well from display list function. So now we go to case 2. If the choice is 2 for the user, if the user is a patient, then we will display the doctor's schedule using the display schedule function. If the user is a doctor, then we search for the patient by his name, so that we ask the user to enter the user in this case is a doctor, so we ask him to enter the patient's first name. Once he enters the patient first name, we search for him using this function, search patient by his name. Then if the user is a receptionist, for case 2, then we will display the doctor's list using display list. For case 3, if the user is a patient, what we will do is that we will search for the doctor by his name. So we ask the user, who is the patient, to enter the doctor that he's looking to. So he's looking for a specific doctor, say Alessandro. Then he enters the first name, and then we search for the doctor, for that doctor by his first name, using find by first name function. Then if the user is a doctor, what we will do is that we will search for the patient by his ID. So we ask the doctor to enter the ID of the patient that he wants to find, and then we look for him, we search for that ID using this function, search patient by ID. Search for the patient by ID. Lastly, we will, if the user is a receptionist, we will search for the doctor by his name, and then we ask the receptionist to enter the first name of the doctor that he's searching for. Then we pass the first name as a parameter in the function search doctor info by name.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Imad. And I will continue at the point in which my friend has stopped at case 4. So here this case is for the patient and receptionist. It's basically we are finding the available doctors. So the implementation of this function is basically we store the head into a doctor object, and then we have a validation while loop, like while current node. While we have a node, we do these steps. We check if the schedule is not null, the doctor schedule, and then if the schedule is not null, and then we compare the status we have with available. If it's available, then we're gonna print the node, and then we go to the next node until the current node is equal to none, and the function will terminate. Yeah, and for the doctor case here, we are updating the doctor schedule. I mean, the doctor is adding a new schedule. So here basically we are asking the doctor for his name to validate against the list of doctors we have, and then here we basically store. I mean, we here have get doctor function. So this function will return an object of a doctor. So if the doctor is available, we compare the name we sent with the list of names of doctor names. If we find the node, then we return it. If we don't, we return null. Okay, so the idea of storing the object into another doctor object, because I want to validate if the doctor is not equal to null. So if it's not equal to null, we're gonna get the user input, and then update the doctor schedule. Okay, so here we get the doctor schedule, and then we update the schedule for that specific doctor, and then we display the list of the doctors we have. Okay, so case 5 is for the receptionist. Here we are storing the patient. So basically, we are calling this function patient.insertion sort. So in this function, we are creating an object of patient. Another object, current, has the head node. So here while loop, while current not equal to null, so while we have a node, we store. We have another patient object next, so we store the next current into the patient, and then we call the sorted insert. Sorted insert, here we are sending the object sorted and current, and then we check. So if the sorted is equal to null, and get first name more than equal to new node get first name, so we store that object into new node, and then we equalize it with the sorted. Else current equal to the sorted list, and then while current next not equal to null, so we go to the next node. Yep, until we have a sorted list, linked list. Basically, we send the sorted list by reference, so we have access to it here. Then for the case 6 is basically updating the patient phone number. Here we're getting the patient ID, asking the user for the patient ID, and then the phone number, and then we are finding the node that the receptionists want to update. So we compare the ID with the IDs in our linked list. So if we if we find the ID, and then we're gonna set a new phone number, and then the phone number is updated successfully, else so the code is not found. Case 7 is, we are deleting a record of patient. So here we're asking the user to enter the ID, and then we call the delete node function in this function. So we compare if we find the ID. So we are deleting the node here. Case 8, it will return to the main interface. Case 9 is exiting the program. So that's all. Thank you for listening.